All right, we have engine sitting on a tire. The transmission is going to be supported by the smaller hoist. Got my subframe ready to roll underneath it. Got the Russian running, warming up. We'll get this, see if we can get this engine sitting on the subframe again. All right, we got the engine and transmission assembly back on the subframe on the pallet, and getting closer to getting this thing back in the car. So now that we got it on the subframe, I can go ahead and get the turbos put on, do some repairs to the engine harness, and get the throttle bodies, EGR valves, all that back on. Let's see. And I'm going to swap out that front driveline, and we'll be close to getting this thing set in the car. Oh, got some fuel lines I got to connect up to on the back as well. So let's get to it. I had to bring the engine hoist over and lift up each side of the motor because I didn't put these on first. Coming off the turbos, and they have to fit there in behind the motor mount. So I just lifted one side up at a time, got it on there. Did the same thing on this side. You can see this one. And then on this side, I actually made a mistake on how the power steering pump, one of the lines came off. So it comes off the bottom of the pump, comes across the top of this turbo pipe, but behind the motor mount, and then does a loop. You can see it right there. And then there's a little hook, it hooks on the cross member, and then comes back to the back of your steering gear. So I attached that too, so it's secured. I think now I'm gonna put the intake manifolds together, get everything else tied up. I got to get the fuel lines connected from the pumps from the filters, so we'll get that connected. Try to get as much put together so we can put it back in the car. All right, I'm gonna get to it. So I'm cleaning up the EGR valve assemblies. You can see this is, I already scraped a bunch of heavy stuff off of this one. Now I gotta spray it with WD-40 to help let it soak. Just got done cleaning this one up. It looks a lot better. So now I'm gonna do the other side. All right, we got the other throttle body cleaned up, or I'm sorry, not throttle body, EGR valve. So we'll go ahead and clean up the manifolds and get the throttle bodies over here. Probably got to clean them up as well, and we can get these attached. So I guess if you're going to build this for off-road use only, this is where you would do your block off plates, and then EGR removal up there. for off-road use. But we're gonna put this thing back together and get it running. All right, so I got both throttle bodies and EGVAR valves cleaned up and installed. Looks a lot better in there. I did take the pipes off. I'm gonna reinstall them. It was easier to clean up, so I'll get the pipes installed. Now I'm trying getting the fuel lines connected, but I think before I go any further, I'm gonna replace the fuel filters. I got the Volkswagen. It ended up being cheaper than anybody else. It's a 2-filter kit. There's your part number. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this cover off and replace the fuel filters, and then we'll get new gaskets on there and finish connecting up our fuel lines. All right, so you'll need to take these 2 screws here. Otherwise you won't be able to get to the bolt screws underneath it. So take those 2 screws off. This comes out. Filter kit comes with a new seal. Funny thing is, one of these screws wasn't even tight. So then that gives you a chance to get all your screws out. And then we should be able to pop this loose and get her swapped out. All right, so we popped the cover off. Didn't have to do any prying, just pulled up on it. These filters snap in there. Okay, so there's our 2 old ones. There's our 2 Volkswagen replacements. You can see the seal kit. So we'll drop those in, clean up the caps, put the new seals in. So last night I was able to pick at it. This side's pretty much done. You can see got the driveline bolted back up. I got this exhaust mounted up. Or no, I'm sorry. I got the driveline bolted on this. Haven't done the exhaust on this side. But I did get my throttle body and EGR valves cleaned up and installed on both sides. I got all my fuel lines connected. I need to order some new fuel hose. I was trying to find the part numbers, haven't been able to find any. Some of them seem like they're pre-shaped, but I may just have to make my own fittings. I got this exhaust installed with the bracket, wiring harness for the O2 sensors pulled up and ready to go. So I'd say this side is pretty much done, ready to go in the car, minus EGR pipe right there. So got to get the bracket mounted back here in the back of the fuel filter housing. And then we'll get this other exhaust manifold installed down there. Exhaust pipe, catalytic converters. Get that installed. And we should be getting close to putting this in the car. Yeah, I'm just working on the damaged electrical wires. So I stripped this one back. And this is what I found. Looks like somebody's repaired it. Or attempted to repair it. I don't know. It looks pretty crappy. So they're separated from the rest of the harness. I'm gonna go ahead and strip this wire back, see what we got to do, and we'll go ahead and solder the connections back together. Shrink wrap it and wrap it up with electrical tape. This, I believe, goes to that coolant temperature sensor. So I think that will be the big one that we found that was damaged. I'll do a good inspection on it. So we should be at a point where we can I got the exhaust manifold bolted up. Give you a picture of that. Worked out good. Got some anti-seize on there. So I'll get this electrical thing fixed, and then I think we can just double check everything. I need to pull the driveline off, put that center replacement center bearing on there, or carrier bearing. That's what we used to call them. And then we'll be wrap stripped back, and the wires aren't actually broken. It's just the insulation's missing. It's kind of weird that these two were wired together with like a rigid 90, but that's where it wore down. I think it's just wires are getting brittle. If you notice, right, focus there, it's cracked. So I'm gonna see if I can shrink wrap the wires individually without cutting them, and then I'll shrink wrap them together, and then that should get that fixed. All right, I got the rear driveline out. I was pretty stuck in there on the rear differential, and then it started leaking oil out of this. So I'm gonna have to inspect it, see what's going on. But here's your center support. Pretty obvious on this one, but I could just see daylight after I pulled the motor. And I tell you what, it's definitely easier to pull this with the motor out. Mainly because you don't have to drop your exhaust to get it out of the way. Otherwise, it's tucked up there above the exhaust. So you can see this thing's pretty much shot. So, you know, this is the second one of our Touaregs that has that wore out. And I'm just gonna expect to replace them when I pull the motor. The blue one's probably the same way. But we'll get this swapped out. All right, so we got the rear drive line set up out here on the table. We got a storm coming in this weekend, but right now it's not too bad. So I'm gonna take advantage of it and do this out in front of the garage or the shop. And so to start, I marked this flange here. You'll be taking this off and putting it onto the new one. Comes with the new metal support. So, but I just mark it just for reference front in case I, you know, get caught up or get delayed and I forget. But you can also tell this little arch side goes to the rear. So straight edge to the front, arch to the rear, be good to go. So we'll take that off. Try to record some more, but this is the tricky part, is just getting this over top. Kind of just lift up on it all the way around, and then we'll pop it off. Then we got to reach in there and get the little clip, disengage the clip, which was the tricky part last time, if I remember right. You pull the clip and then you got to push it in and pull it out at the same time. So I'm gonna try to set up my vise here. Extra set of hands with the vise. Kids are doing school. So let's see what we can get done. I'd like to get this done before I gotta go to work tonight. Hey, one thing I forgot to mention you'll want to do is mark your drive lines. So what I did, I marked here to here. Once I get this off, I'll transfer that line all the way down. If you want to put your drive lines back together, you're hoping and assuming if it ever has been apart, somebody did that. They are balanced and weighted. See a weight here. And there's another one down there. So yeah, pay attention to that. So next thing, all I did is try to chisel on my last one I did, and it just seemed to dig up the metal too much. So I just got a cheap flat screwdriver that I don't mind. It's not one of my nicer ones. And basically get it underneath that lip, tap it in, and then pry it up. And then just basically bending this edge all the way up around it until it's like that. So then now I'll put the edge of the screwdriver right there, hit it, and it should pop loose. Now we got it separated. There's a C-clip right down inside there. I'll try to clean it up. I'm gonna put it in the vise so I got some way to hold it. And we'll see if I can show you the C-clip that we gotta disengage. All right, so once I put my joint up, or my axle up in the vise, my joint came apart. So I carefully gathered up all my 6 balls there, bearings, marked my cage to the drive line, and then now I'm gonna start cleaning it up. But what I did also is I used just tin snips to cut the band on the rubber boot here and allow me to push that back a little bit more, just to give you a little bit more room. It's gonna have to come off anyway, so just give you a chance to move around with it. All right, let's see if we can get this apart. All right, so I got this cleaned up, and you can see the little clip that you need in there. I'm not too worried about my joint knuckle coming apart like that. You just gotta be careful putting it back together. And maybe it'll make for a good video to show you in case your joint comes apart. So this is what's tricky though, is getting that snap ring out. It'll expand and then come out, and then we'll have to make sure we mark the splines on this to that. Okay, so we got the joint apart. This is that C-clip that you're looking for. It's fitted in here. You won't get the C-clip out. You expand it, which allows it to come out of this groove, and then you pull the spline shaft apart like that. Something to keep in mind. Clean up your splines before you start pulling it off. And then we had to do a little persuasion. We used our brass punch so it doesn't mar anything, and I held it while my son tapped it through here, and that came right out. So yeah, that's that. So now we got to get this bearing off. So I'm going to pull out my Harbor Freight press and see if we can make it come apart. We might put some heat to it too. I'll try to make that the easy part, less hammering, and we'll go from there. So we cleaned it up, and before you start pressing it apart, you want to get this C-clip right there. You can see in there. And then we can proceed with pushing that bearing off. All right, so again, goes off without saying, having a nice hydraulic press. I've had this thing, for probably 20 years now. Bought it from Harbor Freight. When my wife's Explorer's rear differential came apart inside, we bought that. We went to get one from a pick and pull, and it was ridiculously expensive. So we bought a new differential and the press for less than what we bought than what we would have paid for a used differential from pick and pull at the time. So definitely paid for itself over the years. And you can see we gave it some heat, but it's on there pretty good. So but she separated, nothing fancy. I think at the time the press was less than $100, so I don't know what they're going for now. So we are going to clean everything up, clean up our splines. They look good. We're going to clean up our bearings, put our joint back together, get all the parts ready to put this bad boy together. I got to clean up in here. So this is supposed to be grease, so you can see that is what was oozing out of this rear coupler. So this is just another similar joint. So I need to pull this apart, probably clean it out and put some fresh grease in there. That's crazy though. All right, I think this one's not pressed on. It's tight fit, but the bolts, when you bolt it to the pinion flange, that's what holds that all together. So we'll clean it up, make sure there's no damage, make sure the flex boot's not damaged. Yeah, for now we're gonna clean. Here's the part number for this. I'll probably have to over-spike talk it because of the music. It even comes with grease. The boots, a new O-ring, band, and your support bearing. All right, let's see if we can get it together. Okay, so we got everything cleaned up, all our little ball bearings. Splines look good, did a good inspection, bearing cage. We got our new parts sitting here. Oh, except for our bearing, we got that there. And then we got this cleaned up. There's definitely some wear on there, but I think it'll be fine. I mean, we can see that the grease was in a pretty bad shape, no longer grease material. So first thing we're gonna do is put our stub shaft here in our vise, heat up our bearing a little bit, and see if it'll slide on like the last one. So we'll just use a little butane torch and see if we drop it on there. We get that on there, and then we can start putting our bearing together and the boots and everything else. So kind of reverse assembly of how we took it apart. redo my seam. I don't think it takes much, but I'll hand you the torch again. Okay, so my little camera battery failed right when I had it going, so you guys didn't probably see it. But again, I use my little V10 torch. I heat up just the center bearing race from the inside out. We're probably about 40 degrees out here right now. So the shaft was already somewhat cool. Heated it up, slid right on. Some things to note: there's a rounded edge on this flange that goes forward towards the transmission. And then these little folded tabs you see here go backwards. But if you just heat it up for 3 to 5 minutes, careful not to melt any rubber. Don't need to get it super hot. Put it on there and just push it on with your hands. It'll seat all the way down and be super good. So there we go. Bearings installed. And we got to start putting this back together. Okay, so we almost forgot. Also, after you get your bearing on there, don't forget to put your snap ring back in, circlip. Just use a screwdriver to push that end in. Start with one end and then work your way around. There we go. And then you give it a little spin, the circlip. If you put your pencil, yep, and that. There you go. Then if it spins like that, you know it's locked in there. Okay, so what we found easiest is we put the bearing dry all together on the rollers inside the cage, inside this center section. Then we worked it carefully into this, no forcing, just till it rolled itself right in. And then we've been squirting grease in there and working it around with our finger. Can lift up one ball bearing, squeeze some grease underneath it. So we got lots of grease worked in there. It's moving nice and freely with my finger there. So what we're going to do now is we will slide that stub shaft front section into here, get it to lock, get the snap ring to lock onto it, and then we put the rest of that grease, we'll inject it all around in here, fill up that boot as much as we can. Then we tap our cap back on and we should be done, hopefully before I go to work. So I lined up my lines, so we got the shaft back together right. You're gonna push it down and you'll feel it kind of snap in all the way down. You don't have to force it, just hand pressure. And then to make sure that snap ring's on there, give it a tug back. You know it's locked in there. So that's all good. We'll clean up this real quick. Use our rubber mallet, tap the boot on. Before we tap it down, we're gonna put the rest of this grease in there, just fill it up. So let us get the grease in there. We're gonna need 4 hands and then we'll tap it back down. All right, so this is the end of the drive line that bolts up to the pinion flange on the rear differential. It started oozing out stuff, and when I took it off, it kind of separated. This is basically that same kind of 6-ball centrifugal or velocity joint or whatever it is, continuous velocity joint. I want to clean it out. I'm just trying to figure out the best way and then get it packed full of grease, or I just put grease in it to add to what's in there. I think I'll do is clean out what I can by hand. I could pull this out with the ball bearings, leave the cage on there and try to get that snap ring, but we'll see. Okay, so didn't record anything, but what I found is if I pull straight up on this, it gets me in there and just slight angle. You turn it too much, the ball bearings will fall out. I was able to wipe it out really good. And then I've been packing in and working it around, packing it in, working it around. Just some Schaefer's 274. It's a Molly extreme pressure grease that I have. I think it'll be fine. I could take this apart, but I looked up online and I can get, same company that makes that bearing, I can get a replacement one. So I'm gonna go with this. And then, don't know if I've said this, what we're doing is just trying to get this thing up and running. So we have a backup vehicle so I can work on the Lincoln, because the Lincoln's got some major timing chain issues and I need to get it fixed, but we want to have a backup vehicle while it's tore apart. So this one's going to be running, and then we're going to take that motor and tear it down. I think it'll make a good video to see what actually melted in there and what damage was done, and see if we can diagnose what caused the failure. I'd be curious about it. And if it's salvageable, we'll rebuild that motor. If not, I have another motor way over there, right there, with the silver valve covers. That's supposed to be just wore out, had a lot of blow by. So either one of those, we're going to rebuild the motor completely, top to bottom, make it brand new. When it's ready, then we're going to pull this Touareg back in, drop the motor. I'm going to rebuild, go through and refresh the tranny, new clutches, seals, discs, whatever I can, clean it, put it back together, so it'll have a new engine, new tranny. And then when I do that, I'm going to end up replacing this little end bearing setup. It's actually replaceable, and it's actually not too bad in prices. I just did a quick search. I can get one for probably 40 or 50 bucks. So I'll put a new one of those on. That, if it needs to, should be good. And then I'll probably do that rubber coupling where it ties in the transfer case. I'll replace that. So everything's replaced. I'm going to clean up the driveline and paint it, but that way the car will be brand new. So again, we do plan on going a little bit further in depth eventually, but this is just to get us a driving vehicle. All right. There's a little groove here. No O-ring. I checked the pictures, schematics. I couldn't find anything that showed an O-ring there. So maybe there's a notch on this cap that locks on there. So I'm not going to put an O-ring on it. I'm going to leave it as is. If anybody knows anything different, let me know. Something I can add to later if we do find out there's no ring. I couldn't find a part number for it anywhere. So yeah, let me know. I'm gonna go ahead and line this up. There's a little washer in there, like what I would almost call similar to a bearing cage, that'll press up against. You gotta line it up with the bolt holes here and here, and the ball bearing. So I'll slide that together, get it connected, and this thing will be ready to go back onto the, I gotta put the bracket on this as well. And then this driveline will be ready to put on the car.